Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our class. Psalms in Hebrew and comparative translations. This morning we are going to be studying Psalm 10. I'd like to note a couple of things. First of all, thank you all for your flexibility. For last week, I was planning to teach from my brother-in-law's hospital room, but then it turned out that the therapy dogs were at the same time, and he really wanted to go to the therapy dogs. So I took him to the therapy dogs on the third floor of the hospital instead. I did want to start by saying that my brother-in-law, Aaron Besser, he is a 28-year-old teacher in DC, teaches social studies, and he has B-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's an aggressive type of cancer that responds very well to treatment. And he finished his first round of chemo in the hospital last week, and he's home. And the rest of his 4.5 months of treatment will be outpatient, God willing. And so far, everything seems to be responding exactly the way the doctors predicted. This is a very treatable form of cancer. And the doctors and we are very, very hopeful that not only will this be relatively short, but that it will be completely cured at the end of it and the cancer will not come back. And most people who have this kind of cancer end up with that kind of a result, especially people who are under 30 and in good health, which he is. And it's really scary, but the prognosis is good, and we're trying to be upbeat and hopeful about it. Anyway, I will likely be well, I bought the tickets already, so I will be going down again in the beginning of May to visit him and to do his grocery shopping and to cook for him a little bit. And that will also be a Monday, Tuesday, because my day off is Monday, so it's easy for me to do that. But because it won't be in the hospital, I can be fairly confident that there won't be therapy dogs, and also that it will be probably perfectly fine for me to sit in his apartment and teach the class. So, I mean, we'll find out once I get there in May, but high likelihood of not canceling this class, even if I'm out of town. One last little bit of, well, two last little bits of business. I wanted to welcome Larry Weiss. This is his first time coming, but you probably remember Marv Weiss, who has been coming to these classes. Marv passed away. He was a member of our synagogue who joined last year in anticipation of his own end. And he loved this class so much and spoke about it to Larry, and so Larry has decided to come, and so we'll dedicate this class to the memory of Marv. And the learning that we do should be for the Ilui of his neshama, that his soul should ascend, and may his memory be a blessing. So that's I wanted to welcome Larry. And then the last bit of business is that next Tuesday, 1 week from today, is the day before Pesach. That is to say, Seder is Wednesday night. So I will not be teaching this class on next Tuesday, but we will meet in 2 Tuesdays on Chol HaMoed Pesach. So the next one is in 2 weeks. All right. Let's get started. We have Psalm 10 to learn together today. And like usual, we'll start by reading the psalm in Hebrew and then with a couple of different English translations. And then we'll talk about our impressions of the psalm and our sense of its connection to the other psalms that we've been reading. All right. Psalm 10. Lama Adonai ta'amod berachok ta'alim li'itot batzara. B'gavat rasha yidlak ani yitafsu b'mizimot zu chashavu. Ki hilel rasha al ta'avat nafsho uvotzea berech mi'etz Adonai. Rasha kegova apo bal yidrosh ein Elohim kol mizimotav. Yachilu drachav b'chol eit marom mishpatecha minegdo kol tzorarav yafiach bahem. Amar belibo bal emot lador vador asher lo v'ra. Allah pihu malay mirmot vatoch tachat leshono amal va'aven. Yeshev bamarav chatzerim bamistaragim yaharog naki enav lechelcha yitzponu. Ye'erov bamistar k'aryeh v'suko ye'erov lachatof ani yachtof ani b'moshcho berishto. Yidke yashoach v'nafal ba'atzumav chel kaim. Amar bilibo chashach el histir panav bal ra'a lanetzach. Kuma Adonai el nisa yadecha al tishkach anavim. Al meni eitz rasha Elohim amar bilibo lo tidrosh. Ra'ita ki ata amal v'chas tabit latet biyadecha alecha ya'azov chelecha yatom ata hayita ozer. Shavor zeroa rasha v'ra tidrosh risho bal timsa. Adonai melech olam va'ed avdu goyim me'artzo. Tavat anavim shamata Adonai. Tachin libam takshiv oznecha. Lishpot yatom badach. Bal yosif od la'aroch and no shmin haaretz. Would someone like to read translation?
I could do it.
All right, Mark, how about the one from the Jewish Publication Society on page 2 on the left?
Gotcha. Why, O Lord, do you stand aloof, heedless in times of trouble? The wicked in his arrogance hounds the lowly. May they be caught in the schemes they devise. The wicked crows about his unbridled lusts. The grasping man reviles and scorns the Lord. The wicked, arrogant as he is in all his scheming, thinks he does not call to account. God does not care. His ways prosper at all times. Your judgments are far beyond him. He snorts at all his foes. He thinks, I shall not be shaken. Through all time, never be in trouble. His mouth is full of oaths, deceit, and fraud. Mischief and evil are under his tongue. He lurks in outlying places from a covert. Wait, where am I? Where did I go?
8. No, number 9.
He lurks in outlying places from a covert. He slays the innocent. His eyes spy out the hapless. He waits in a covert like a lion in his lair, waits to seize the lowly. He seizes the lowly as he pulls his net shut. He stoops, he crouches, and the hapless fall prey to his might. He thinks God is not mindful. He hides his face. He never looks. Rise, O Lord, strike at him, O God. Do not forget the lowly. Why should the wicked man scorn God, thinking you do not call to account? You do look, you take note of mischief and vexation. To requite is in your power. To you the hath entrust himself. You have ever been the orphan's help. Oh, break the power of the wicked and evil man, so that when you look for his wickedness, you will find it no more. The Lord is king forever and ever. The nations will perish from his land. You will listen to the entreaty of the lowly, O Lord. You will make their hearts firm. You will incline your ear to champion the orphan and the downtrodden, that men who are of earth tyrannize no more.
All right. And let's read one more English translation. How about King James Version? Who would like to read? Bree?
The one on the right there? Yeah.
Yeah, I think Bree said Bree said that she would read on the right.
Okay.
Why standest thou afar off, O Lord? Why hidest thou thyself in times of trouble? The wicked in his pride doth persecute the poor. Let them be taken in the devices that they have imagined. For the wicked boasteth of his heart's desire, and blesses the covetous, whom the Lord abhorreth. The wicked, through the pride of his countenance, will not seek after God. God is not in all his thoughts. His ways are always grievous. Thy judgments are far above out of his sight. As for all his enemies, he puffeth at them. He hath said in his heart, I shall not be moved, for I shall never be in adversity. His mouth is full of cursing and deceit and fraud. Under his tongue is mischief and vanity. He sitteth in the lurking places of the villages. In the secret places doth he murder the innocent. His eyes are privily set against the poor. He lieth in wait secretly as a lion in his den. He lieth in wait to catch the poor. He doth catch the poor when he draweth him into his net. He croucheth and humbleth himself that the poor may fall in his strong ones. He hath said in his heart, God hath forgotten. He hideth his face. He will never see it. Arise, O Lord, O God, lift up thine hand. Forget not the humble. Wherefore doth the wicked condemn God? He has said in his heart, Thou wilt not require it. Thou hast seen, for thou beholdest mischief and spite. To requite it with thy hand, the poor committeth himself unto thee. Thou art the helper of the fatherless. Break thou the arm of the wicked and the evil man. Seek out his wickedness till thou find none. The Lord is king forever and ever. The heathen are perished out of his land. Lord, thou hast heard the desire of the humble. Thou wilt prepare their heart. Thou wilt cause thine ear to hear, to judge the fatherless and the oppressed, that the man of the earth may no more oppress.
All right, so what what are your impressions from this? What do you notice right off the bat?
Are all the Psalms written by David? Are they all David's words? King David?
No. But this one, I mean, no, not all of the Psalms are written by David. A large portion of them are dedicated to David, and the tradition says that David is the author of many of the Psalms, but some are not. I think what you're pointing to is that this is the first Psalm that we have that doesn't have a superscription, that doesn't have a line at the beginning that says, you know, who wrote it, right? Or who it's dedicated to. And that is true. And part of the reason why this Psalm doesn't have that, according to the scholars of Psalms, is it is likely that this Psalm, Psalm 10, actually is part of Psalm 9. That at some point Psalms 9 and 10 were split. But in fact, Psalms 9 and 10 have one overarching theme, and when you read them together, they have some linguistic parallels too. In fact, we talked 2 weeks ago about how Psalm 9 is a bit of an acrostic, but kind of a broken one. And Psalm 10 picks up where that acrostic leaves off, but also is a broken one, right? Like you can see in the Hebrew that there's a verse that starts with a resh, and there's a verse that starts with a shin, and a verse that starts with a taf, and there's a verse that starts with a kuf before the resh. But in between there are other verses, and it's not at all clear that it is in. So in other words, it's not a perfect.
No.
It seems like maybe these were once one psalm, but then when they were split up into multiple psalms, they were then edited by different authors, and expanded, and then the acrostic sort of got garbled. But it seems like there might have been a tradition of this being one psalm at some point, and that's part of why this psalm does not have a superscription at the beginning.
I was very struck by the fact that this seemed to continue Psalm 9, very specifically listing all of the evils, all those things that are spoken of, more implied about who the adversaries are. But here it's very specific what they do, what they think, and how they are distant from God, if totally divorced from God.
Yeah, great. So yeah, Psalm 9 brings up the enemies. Psalm 10 definitely goes into deep depth about what the wicked might do.
Right.
Murray.
Right. I just have a question.
Oh, fine.
Why are some words underlined and some in blue and some in red?
That's the word processor.
Oh,
It has it's like the blue is a grammar, it
That's what I
doesn't like
was-
semicolons, but semicolons is what is used in that case in poetry. So just ignore the
Here.
the Microsoft Word thinks it knows grammar better than the authors of these
Right.
translations, but in fact the authors of these translations know perfectly well. And the red is when there's a spelling error. Yeah, so Microsoft Word doesn't know the word sitteth or the word boasteth or the word
Right.
blesseth, because those are not standard English anymore, but they are the King James Version. And so if we're going to read the King James Version, we should read that version and not an updated version of the King James Version, which
Right.
do exist. And we could read the International Standard Version or the KJV, like updated, the revised KJV version, but that's not the one that I think. If we're going to look at a King James translation, we should look at the one that's from the time of King James. So
Right.
that's why. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I was just struck by that.
Yeah. Murray.
Well, it has sort of, I think, a combination of a critique of God, and the other is a sort of exhortation of a righteous person, saying all these things are about in the world, and where are you, God? Rise up and write things. And it has a sort of mixture, and at some point in the beginning especially, it sounds like a lamentation.
Yeah, nice, beautiful, right? The overarching sort of theme or spiritual message of this psalm seems to be, God, when I look around at the world, I understand why wicked people do wicked things. It's because the wicked people say, God isn't paying any attention. God isn't paying any attention, right? Let us know, Adonai, why do you stand at a distance? Why are you so far away so that the wicked people can get away with whatever they're doing? The wicked people, they say, no one's paying any attention to me. No one's paying attention to the stuff that I'm doing, right? God isn't going to do anything. They said in their heart, God has forgotten. God's face is hidden. I'm totally gonna get off scot-free. And then you're absolutely right. In verse 12, vanquishing God, arise, lift up your hand. God, don't stand at a distance. Do something about it. Do something about it. The world is burning and you're just watching. Yeah, I think that from a spiritual perspective, that's the message of Psalm 10, right? And then at the end, sort of a hope or a prayer or a restatement of truth. Adonai is sovereign in every time and place, right? Don't you think that the wicked people are going to get away with it? God, that's going to come back to them. It's going to come back to them. Yeah. All right. Any other first thoughts, first comments, reactions?
It reminds me of Maud. She used to say, God's going to get you for this.
Yeah. Yeah.
As you were speaking just now, Rabbi, all I could think of is the current situation in Israel. And the first half was the government. And the second half were all those people in the streets.
All right.
Very,
Okay.
very true.
Yeah. I'm not gonna get distracted into a conversation about Israel, but I will remind
I don't mean to do that, but that
I
came
will
to my
remind everybody what I said right before 10. Not everybody was in the room yet, which is that I just sent out at like 9:40 an email about Israel that everybody after this class should take a look at. And then I intend to speak about Israel also at
Thank you.
Sholas Shabbat. Well, I understand that it's complicated and worrisome and that people do want to explore and talk about it, but maybe not in our Psalms class. But I hear what you're saying about when you look at these Psalms, right? They're supposed to resonate with our lives. And so whether that's an external enemy or an external threat, or right, whether you can point to current leaders in the United States or in Israel that have these issues of haughtiness or thinking that they can get away with anything, right? Or whether it's an internal haughtiness that we see in ourselves, right? In what way have we sometimes said, oh, no one's paying attention to me, I can get away with anything? Not necessarily like hiding in the lurking in the alleyways and killing people. I'm not suggesting that any of us are habitually doing that the way that the wicked is described here, like a lion in a lair waiting in and hiding, but we do sometimes feel that distance from God that makes us feel like maybe nothing, maybe no one is paying attention, maybe there's no justice in the world.
I don't remember if the Psalms we've already studied have anywhere in there a plea to God.
Yeah, very common, and
I don't remember
we have
that's-
seen a couple that have that where it's like arise, O God, or pay attention, or hear us, or yeah, right.
Yep.
Yeah, but again, I think, right, it's very, just because it's common doesn't mean that it isn't meaningful.
Well, this is
Right?
very intense.
Yeah, in this psalm, it's super intense. Now, one of the things that we do in this class is we talk about the liturgical connections in this psalm, which means, where do we find this psalm in our service? Now, does anybody, when I read it out loud in Hebrew or when we read it in English, did any of the verses like feel like, did you recognize any of them from our liturgy?
I didn't recognize it, but I did constantly hear the word Rasha.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, I was able to find 3 verses that are quoted in the Jewish liturgical tradition, but it was not easy. Right? That is to say, it's not obvious. They're not not obvious connections. So here here we go. We'll look at some of the liturgical uses of the psalm. So here's liturgical liturgical uses of Psalm 10. So also Psalm 9 had 3 verses that were used in our liturgy. So verses 1, 16, and 17 of Psalm 10 are quoted in our liturgy. So first we have Lama Adonai Tamod Barachok, Talim Li'itot Batzara. Why, Lord, do you stand far off, hiding yourself in times of trouble? That's a huge question. I mean, that is a powerful spiritual question. The rest of the poem, I think the rest of the psalm doesn't do that question justice. Like, if the psalm was just that question, how powerful. But then I think the psalm distracts itself. It's trying to do too many things. I mean, this is me as sort of a literary critic or a critic of the poem. I find the rest of the psalm to be very distracting, but that verse, I was not surprised to find that verse is quoted in our Jewish liturgical tradition. Of course, it's not a very commonly used verse. It's only on Erev Rosh Hashanah, the day before Rosh Hashanah, and it's a penitential prayer for Erev Rosh Hashanah, composed by a rabbi named Solomon ben Menachem, Shlomo ben Menachem, and the structure of the prayer, I'm actually going to pull it up and we can look at it, but the structure of the prayer is based on the 13 attributes of God, right, which are Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanu Nerech, right? These are called the 13 attributes of mercy. They're from the middle of the book of Exodus. They talk about God's mercifulness, and they are the main sort of refrain or theme of our Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur liturgy, of the penitential prayers of that season, the Slichot. And the reason is because that line, the line that recalls God's compassion, God gives that line to Moshe after the people sin in the golden calf, and Moshe convinces God to forgive them and not to destroy them. Then God says to Moshe, in the future, whenever you think that the people have sinned, or whenever the people sin, and you want me to forgive them, say these words, and it will unlock my compassionate side, and I will forgive the people. Right. So, and then we have these words. These words are the code, the secret code that God gives to Moshe to help God remember to forgive us. And it's a description of God's forgiveness. All right. So that's why it's the refrain of our Yom Kippur service. Yeah, Mishka.
It also makes me think, especially the word why, gives us a chance or forces us to look at why we have sinned and what our sins are. You stand far off because we've done this and I've done that. And when we go through the recitation of what are perceived or whatever personal, we do the recitation and then we have time to look at our own personal sins. Maybe this is why God has stood far off from us.
Interesting.
Makes us have to think these things.
Yeah, I don't think that's what I mean. Right. I don't think that's I'm not sure that the psalmist is thinking about our sins in that way.
No, but I think that if this is a part of our service, specifically when we are trying to enumerate and understand what we've done, this is like, okay, why? I did this, that, and the other thing.
I mean, let's look at it and see. That's not how I interpret it, but that's I totally hear that, right? Like, one answer to this question might be the sins of humanity, right? Why, Lord, do you stand far off, hiding yourself in times of trouble? One answer might be, well, because we've sinned. I don't think that's what that's the only possible answer. I don't know that that's what the psalmist intended, and I'm not sure that that's what's going on in this prayer of Rabbi Shlomo ben Menachem. Let's look at it and see. So the prayer is based on the 13 attributes of God, Adonai, right? So it starts. Can you see it?
Can.
Yeah.
All right,
could
it
be a
starts
little
our God
larger.
and God of our ancestors, or God of our fathers, right? Ancestors. 13 divine attributes which were pronounced with compassion. That's the by virtue of every fitting attribute, I beseech the presence of God, my King, with supplication to search for the merit of Israel, who were named and called the rose. All right, the Jewish people is called Shoshana. Save them from all evil in this year, meaning the year that's about to start, because this is a prayer for Erev Rosh Hashanah. So then, okay, then it's going to be 13 different, it's going to be a verse for each of the attributes of God. Okay, so the first one is, if their guilt be so great as to reach the heavens and the stars, then by virtue of every fitting attribute, I plead for mercy for them, to annul for them what is written. I said I will scatter them. So that's a quote from Deuteronomy, right? God promised, I will scatter them for their sins. Okay, and then it's another quote from the Torah. Why should the nations say, where is their God? Which is a quote from Psalm 115, verse 2, right? Lama yomru goyim ayena Eloheim. So basically, what the structure of this psalm is to bring a prediction of God's anger, and then to bring a question from the Psalms mostly, that is sort of responding to God's anger with a question that's like designed to try to bring God back. So here our verse is in the second one. If their iniquities are grievous and too many to count, so first it was the guilt, now it's the sins, right? If their iniquities are grievous and too many to count, then by virtue of every fitting attribute, meaning all of the midot, all of the attributes of God from the 13 attributes, right? Cast them away, Adonai, and conceal them. Let our vigorous words of supplication annul that which is written. I will hide my face from them. So again, astira panai, right? That I will hide my face. That's a quote from Deuteronomy 32, where God is describing a future where the people have sinned. And what is God's response? God's response will be to hide God's face. And then our answer is from Psalms, from our Psalm, Psalm 10. Why, Adonai, do you stand far off, hiding yourself in times of trouble? So what Rabbi Shlomo ben Menachem is doing here is he's using the question from the beginning of Psalms to ask a question for God. God, why are you not living up to this ideal of divine mercy? Right? So you're right that that sin is a part of it, but I don't think that he's saying that the reason that God is not acting mercifully is because of the people's sins. I think he thinks the reason that God is not acting mercifully is because God promised to hide God's face. And what he's saying is, what the author of this prayer is saying is, sure, you promised to hide your face, God, but we also have a verse from Psalms that asks this very poignant question: why are you standing so far off? Right? So we can read one more. If they have acted perversely in the presence of their king with a brazen face, then by virtue of every fitting attribute, I offer supplication with a loud voice and say to my soul, pour out your heart as water in the presence of God, who is pure, white, and ruddy. Why, God, have you cast us off forever? Right? So the quote is from Lamentations, and then from Song of Songs. And the question is from Psalm 74. So in each case, like the psalm, the question is drawn from a psalm, and the questions are these poignant, direct asking God, why don't you live up to your true nature of justice? I think it's a very powerful poem. Now, a very powerful prayer, like a very interesting liturgical use of this question. Now, we don't. This is not in our machzor. We don't use this one, but maybe we should. Maybe this coming Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, we should include this one in our in our repertoire, because it's so powerful. Yeah. Okay. Mishka, you seem to you have a question?
Somebody else did.
You're muted.
It reminds me of Moses yelling at God, "You are forsaking us. You made a promise. And why are you have to keep your promise." And there's this piece in here that makes me think about that. God, you're supposed to do this. You're supposed to work on our behalf.
Yeah. One of the questions is Lama Adonai Yechere Apcha Be'amecha, right? Which is Moses' words from Exodus 32.
Okay.
Why should your anger burn against your people? Right. So it's exactly what you're saying. Yeah. It just these very, very powerful questions. Sort of, they went through. The author of this, Shlomo ben Menachem, he went through and found all of these poignant questions in our scripture, and then worked them into this prayer.
What is this? Is Shlomo ben Menachem's time? Where does he fit in?
I have no idea.
Okay. A Talmudist or
No.
Okay.
No, he somewhere medieval. I don't know.
Okay.
I can look him up. There's probably a lot of Solomon ben Menachem, so I'm not sure.
So he may have just been, not just, but a student of Psalms particularly, and looking for all those citations that would acknowledge where they have come from or why they're there.
Yeah, he might have been 16th century Prague.
Okay.
Maybe. Or maybe he was the Meiri, who was from Provence. The Meiri was also, oh no, he was Menachem ben Solomon, not Solomon ben Menachem. There was a Solomon ben Menachem in Constantinople. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know which one this is.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that he's not cited as Rav or Rabbi makes me
No,
think.
he is. He is Rabbi Solomon ben Menachem.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right. So another liturgical use of this psalm comes from the from verse 16. Adonai melech olam va'ed avdu goyim yartzo. That's the one that I recognized when I read through this psalm, because it's used in our weekday morning service in the paragraph before the Ashrei, which in our community we don't read. We just skip that paragraph and go straight to the Ashrei. But if you turn to page 80 in our Siddur, the Ashrei starts halfway down the page, and the paragraph right before it, which starts Yehi Chvod, is an anthology of verses from Psalms, Chronicles, and Proverbs. And the purpose of that anthology is to mention God's name 18 times. And the theme of the prayer is God's eternal sovereignty. In the context of the psalm, where it says, Adonai melech olam va'ed avdu goyim me'artzo, sense is that the nations come and go, but God remains forever, right? In the context of the psalm, where the psalmist is talking about how the wicked people say that God is not looking, in the context of the psalm, it says no, the God is of course looking. Can't you tell that God is looking? Because wicked nations have disappeared over time, right? The Hittites disappeared, and the Assyrians disappeared, and the Persians disappeared, right? The psalmist is saying, like, look at all these peoples that have gone the way of into nothingness, right? But God remains whatever. God remains. So you can, in the context of the psalm, I think the verse is really talking about the nations as wicked, okay? But the anthology quotes it because it's connected to this idea of the destruction of peoples and God's counsel standing rather than the counsel of the nations. And then I give you the verses of the anthology in case you wanted to look them all up. Bunch of verses from Psalms, couple from Chronicles and Proverbs. But our verse here it's right in the middle. Adonai melech olam ved avdu goyim me'artzo. So if you had just said that verse, right? That verse we quote in our everyday Shacharit service, though our particular community skips the paragraph where it's from. So it doesn't surprise me that you didn't recognize it. And verse 17, the final verse, Ta'avat anavim shamata Adonai tachin libam takshivos necha. You hear, Lord, the yearning of the humble, strengthen their hearts and pay heed to them. Verse 17 is quoted by the Igeret HaRamban, which is a letter that the Ramban wrote to his son. The Ramban was a leading Torah scholar of the Middle Ages, not the Rambam, okay? Not the Rambam, who is Moses Maimonides, one of our most famous philosophers and scholars. And we differentiate between these two by accenting the first syllable of Maimonides' name and the last syllable of Nachmanides' name. So that's how you can just tell if I'm talking about the Rambam, it's going to be accent on Ram, and if I'm talking about the Ramban, it's going to be accent on Ban. So anyway, so the Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, or Nachmanides just means son of Nachman, the way that Maimonides means son of Maimon. And so anyway, and their first name was both Moshe. So okay, but Ramban lived in the 13th century, and he wrote a letter to his son. And if you are asking yourself, why is this letter that the Ramban wrote to his son considered liturgy? That's a good question, because it isn't strictly speaking liturgy. However, some Sidurim include this letter as it is sort of like readings that you can read once a week, or readings that you can read after the morning service to like remind you to dedicate your life to holy purposes. Okay, so in some Orthodox Sidurim, right after the Shacharit service and before the Mincha, the afternoon service, is like a section of like extra readings of spiritual import. And the Igeret HaRamban is often included in that section. So at the very, right, the whole letter admonishes the son to live a modest and a humble life. And at the very end of the letter, the Ramban says, read this letter at least once a week and incorporate the teachings into your life. And then it says, toward the end, it says, remove all worldly concerns from your heart during prayer. Prepare your heart before God. Purify your thoughts and think about the words before you utter them. Do this each and every day of your life in all your activities, and you will not come to sin. This way, all your words, deeds, and thoughts will be proper. Your prayers will be pure, clear, clean, appropriate, and acceptable to God, as it is written, when their heart is directed to you, listen to them. Which is the Ramban. The translator of this Ramban is translating, strengthen their hearts and pay heed to them. Tachin libam takshivos necha. When their heart is directed to you, listen to them. If you just had that half of the verse, that it would be a fair translation. If you also had the first half of the verse, then you have to translate it a little bit differently, which is why our translation translates it a little differently than that. So these are the three uses. You can tell that this is a little bit of a stretch, this last one. It's not really liturgy, but it is contained in some Sidurim. What do you think, by the way, about reading a letter, about reminding yourself every day, remove all worldly concerns from your heart during prayer, prepare your heart before God, purify your thoughts? Do you think that it's a fair use of the verse, right? That is to say, the Ramban takes half of verse 17 and uses it as a source text for the idea of purifying your thoughts before prayer, okay? And of the importance of having pure thoughts every day, right? When I see that, and then I read all of Psalm 10, I think this is taking these words out of context, right? In Psalm 10, I don't think that's the theme of the psalm. But on the other hand, right? Maybe it is the answer to the psalm, right? How do you avoid the wickedness inside you? How do you avoid the impulse to do wicked, right? To remember that God is always there, right? The wicked people, they arrogantly say God isn't watching. But if you say, no, I'm going to dedicate my heart to God every day, I'm going to recognize God's presence every day, maybe that's the answer to the wickedness inside of us. So maybe the Ramban, really got it. He really got the core of this song. So Linda had asked at the beginning, did David write this psalm? And the Radak, our tradition says yes, that David did write this psalm, just like he wrote Psalm 9. I think from a critical perspective, we would have to say that these psalms were edited over time, but the tradition definitely says yes, David said this psalm. But the Radak does say, David did not utter this psalm at any one particular occasion. Unlike some of the other psalms that we've looked at, where it was like, David said this when he was running away from his son, or David said this right before he fought, or right after he killed Goliath, or, whatever. This psalm, it's not any one particular moment. It's a prayer that anyone who is in trouble by reason of an enemy might use. The Radak says that it's the way of wicked people to do their work secretly, right? But God is all-seeing. Which I do think is the contrast that the psalmist is trying to make. It's not really about being like a lion and waiting and lurking in wait. It's about the idea of whether you can be seen or not seen, and that ultimately God sees all. And then at the end, the Radak's interpretation of verse 17 is the same as the way that the Ramban reads it, right? Thou will make thy ear attend to their prayer, right? That's specifically tachin libam takshivos necha. It takshivos necha, right? You will listen to them, is specifically to listen to the prayer of the people who are praying, the prayer of the humble. Thou shalt make thine ears to be attentive. God is going to is going to listen to our prayers. And I think that is also one of the answers, right? God does listen. It might seem like God is standing far, far away, but even when it seems like God is standing far away, God listens to the prayer. And then the Koren Tehillim, I like these meditations. This is sort of a spiritual encapsulation of Psalm 10. I feel alienated, frustrated, and abandoned by God. My enemy comes at me out of nowhere, right? Unseen. He is arrogant, deceitful, and vicious. Worse, he does not seem to be accountable to God. Is there no justice? There no justice. Yeah, I think that's the real sense of this psalm. That's the real sense of this psalm. All right, does anybody have any thoughts or comments?
I could just think about folk, not just today, but certainly during the Shoah, wondering, thinking those who might have known this psalm, asking those questions.
Yeah, as I've said before, and I'm sure we'll say again, you don't have to go to the Shoah, to the most extreme example of human cruelty, to have examples of human cruelty. Right? Like, yes,
That
the
just hit
Shoah
me
is
in the head.
right. The Shoah is the most extreme example, no question. The like in the face of the Holocaust, everything else pales. But right, the human cruelty happens every day in ways that that are much more common than the Holocaust, and which continue to force us to ask these questions. Well, is there no justice in the world?
But it also turns then to say that certainly is a problem out there or in there if you're actively, passively involved, what needs to happen afterwards, or what needs to continue to have the faith in God rather than turning away, which I know folks went both ways. Murray, you may have comments on that. If I made my thoughts clear.
Any other
I'd rather
comments about
comment
the?
on
Yeah,
the-
sorry, Murray.
The comment on the issue of prayer. We wash our hands, our face, our bodies, whether in a shower, in a tub, to cleanse ourselves. Prayer to me is that moment of the day or the evening when one stands and cleanses one's heart and one's soul. And it's the only time that most of us have to just focus on ourselves and our innermost thoughts, and thereby bring about a better attitude and a better form of dealing with the world and with other people.
Amen. Yeah, I think that's very powerful, right? We can't control the cruelty of the enemies, and certainly it sometimes seems like the enemies operate without being answerable to anyone. But what we can control is our own responses, and we do that a lot through prayer. and in some ways, this psalm is a prayer that God not stand at a distance, but that God listens and hears and opens God's heart and God's mercy to our plea, to our prayer. That people
Mishka, if I
should,
may just a moment, Rabbi. To Mishka's question, I really don't have any philosophical view other than just to say that no matter how hard I try, I cannot find any rationale, any answer to the, as Rabbi said, cruelty of the Holocaust. It just no answer, no redemptive thoughts.
Yeah.
Natalie, you have to unmute. Here, I wrote, I clicked, you should be able to just, yeah, there you go.
Okay, I did. Doesn't it depend on what we're praying for?
Whether God responds?
Yes.
I think that's a
He
great
can-
question.
If God can hear us, it doesn't mean he's gonna answer us positively. He's gonna give us strength to keep going, no matter what our prayer is. But that's not what people want. People want positive responses, and they don't get it. It's
Yeah.
really hard.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the greatest teachings that I ever had was that sometimes God says no.
Mm.
You know, you ask for things and God's answer isn't always yes. Right? You're right. You're right that we want God's answer to be yes, just like when children want a second helping of dessert and they ask for it and their parents say no. They want the second helping of dessert. It's just, parents know better and that it's not, moderation and trying to teach better habits and right. Like I'm not trying to say that our prayers for healing or help or strength that God's no is the same as a parent's no about an extra piece of cake, right? That's trivializing our prayers.
You don't want an extra piece of cake, but you want your children to go to school and come home the
Right.
same day.
Yes.
You don't want to build
Yeah,
in school.
Right. It's not the same at all, right? I completely agree. I completely agree. And sometimes you send your kids out into the world and they don't come home.
Sure.
And where is God?
And where is God? Yeah. Where is God?
That's the why question.
Yeah. Yeah, right. We look out into the world and we see a world that is full of injustice, full of pain. Now, like Murray says, I have no answers to the Holocaust. Natalie, I have no answer to why that happens to particular children, to particular individuals. I can say this. I believe that God grieves and mourns with us when we are grieving and mourning. That God is present with us when we wake up and choose to make to keep going the next day. I believe that God is present and that our job is to create a world that in which people do not cause other people's children not to come home from school. And that is also God's work in the world. I know it's not super comforting, but I do really believe that. So I'd like to close this morning with an interpretation of Psalm 10 from this book, Psalm Songs, by Gaia Aronoff Bernstein. Not on your sheet, because it's not a translation. It's just she read Psalm 10 and then wrote a poem. Where are you when I need you? When danger is steadfastly there for me? Where are you? Whose side are you on? The evil do evil and get away with it? Thrive? Prosper? They say you're not there, not watching, not. Where are you when they kill children? Where are you in famine and tsunamis and war? Where are you when the old lady is raped in her home and he thinks no one sees? Show yourself. The humbled can't breathe. When the air is full of burning flesh, can't breathe. When lions lick them, can't breathe. When they're drowning, they need to breathe. Knowing you, see, hear, know, everything, knowing you are just there and just here. We'll meet again in 2 weeks on Chol HaMoed Pesach, 2 weeks from now. Next week, we will not meet because it's the preparations for Seder. I'll see you then.